Alright, good afternoon then folks on Thursday the 5th of October. Now if across headlines, really not much change in terms of fresh headlines. We did have some jobless claims figures out, which we will have a look at as and when we get around to it. But Wall Street eyes lower, open after jobs day. The worries over higher treasury yields remain. It's just an article that they're going off. I mean, it's all about yields higher, bonds getting sold, positive for the dollar. But the economic data over the course of this week doesn't make for great reading for that to continue. Certainly in the short term, does it change anything medium to long term? No, it's not what we've been thinking about this week. We're thinking about a bit of a pullback in the dollar, maybe a bit of a bounce back in stocks, and we'll have a look across the charts now in a minute, and we'll have a look across the data and see what we can find. But you can see the US dollar relatively negative across the board. You got South African rand, Turkish lira, Norwegian krone, Mexican peso, which is up against them, but across the rest of the G8 currencies, it's down across all of them, the Chinese yuan included. So bit of negativity in the US dollar today, likely driven by the pullback in yields. Yields are making an attempt through the lows just as we begin the US session as well. And US stock indexes, they're lower, but they are rallying a bit at the open. So we'll have a look at some charts now when we get around to it. Aussie and your Kiwi having a bit of a bounce back, maybe due to yields pulling back slightly, lending a bit of support to the other currencies, but not a massive amount going on in FX land over the course of today. But you can see a bit of a rally at the open stocks. You can see the S&P, the Dow Jones, the Nasdaq and the Russell all pushing higher. Right, you have a look at yields are making an attempt through the lows, struggle to maintain any sort of upside post jobless claims, a little bit of a spike higher, but then have come back lower as well. The 2-year yield is through the lows. Oil is gone again in today off demand concerns from some weak economic data out of the US over the course of this week. Obviously there's a lot of long positioning built up that had to be closed out, so the speed of the move is not too surprising once you get a clear actual reason for a bit of a pullback. The fact that has been aggressive is no real surprise. The US dollar is a bit negative at the moment. You can maybe go slightly shorter time frame. See your Aussie pushing higher, Kiwi, Euro and Sterling all pushing higher, dollar Swiss, dollar CAD, dollar yen and the dollar index all pushing lower as well. Now the initial jobs claims are not exactly dreadful reading once you have a look at the figures. Consensus 210k. We did come in below that, albeit slightly above the previous, but slightly below consensus. So when you have a look at that, maybe not as bad as first seems, but if you have a quick look in, I know it's only a couple of thousand here we're talking about. It's gone from 202 to 205 to 207. Not really much, but it is still a slight bit of an uptrend. So jobless claims rising. Maybe markets not looking at that with too much favour. As you said, we looked at the ADP employment figures yesterday. We looked at the job openings figures yesterday. It probably sets us up, or it looks like it sets us up for a bit of a weaker than expected non-farm payrolls and a bit of a tick up in the unemployment rate, and that is a pretty good reason for a pullback in the US dollar, which we're looking at over the course of this week. Now, as I said, does it really change much kind of long term or even medium term? Probably not. The US is still on a slightly different rate path. US is still on a slightly different rate path to the rest of the G8, or the majority of the rest of the G8, still potentially going to hike rates one more time. Now, weak NFP print tomorrow does reduce the probability of that actually being followed through with, but you see markets don't really know what way to go. You can see the S&P 500 here pretty sideways. Just bring this back to a slightly higher time frame. We are down to begin the week on stocks, back higher, and we've kind of met back in the middle, just chopped sideways over the last 24 hours across the US indexes, across the European indexes. Really a pretty choppy range-bound market, driven by yields slightly choppy as well. Sort of failing on the 10-year yield to break through the high, break through the lows, should I say. Really choppy market conditions over the course of today so far. Does that mean we can do anything over the rest of the afternoon? Possibly not. Not the easiest of videos to do. You're kind of sitting here thinking, I don't know what way things go, but the fact that the trend in the dollar has stalled this week is no surprise. The fact that the trend in stocks this week has kind of stalled and stabilized isn't really much of a surprise. Had some weak economic data from the US. Again, does it change anything at the moment? Not really, but that NFP print, I think, is important. It always is important, but I think the fact that we've got some negative employment figures already, if that goes in line with that, you have to imagine the bounce back in the dollar and the pause in the downtrend in stocks continues. Again, it's a little bit more difficult for stocks as rising unemployment is not positive for stocks, but it does reduce the need of further hikes from the Fed. So yeah, I mean, been right so far this week, not by any sort of massive amount, but looking at it on Tuesday. Once we got those job openings figures, looking at down here at the lows, we have been proven right since then. Is it enough really to get much of a trade out of? Not quite, but if that does continue into not the Fed, into NFP tomorrow, it does give us something to look at potentially into next week. We'll obviously have a look at next week as and when we get to it, but yeah, that's pretty tricky trade out there. I wouldn't go get caught up piling into any positions just yet. I think it may be a bit of a sit and wait game until we get NFP tomorrow.